Hello, this presentation is a summary of the countywide growth trends and forecasts that were developed for the Park County Land Use Plan. The purpose of these trends and forecasts are to help underpin the key policy choices that were developed within the plan. Park County has a population of 29,800 residents. The state of Wyoming has forecasted the county to grow by 3,000 new residents over the next 20 years. To support the plan development, we have developed a range of potential growth for the county over the next 20 years to capture both historic trends in population change as well as recent trends in development to support the plan development. We forecast that Park County will grow to between 32,000 and 33,500 residents by 2040. One of the major reasons for a potential range in development is the changes in demographics within the county. Park County has a larger than average senior population base. And this cohort of residents has been growing at a much faster rate than other age cohorts for the county. Residents over the age of 65 years old have grown by 3% annually since 2000, while the workforce population has grown at a much lower rate. The result is a much higher percentage of residents within Park County that are of retirement age or aging out of the workforce. We've also surveyed economic trends and conditions to help underpin future growth potentials for the county. The Park County economy is anchored by agriculture as well as the tourism industries. These two industries drive the majority of economic activity that occurs within the county. The communities within Park County also serve as regional commercial hubs, providing access to healthcare, commercial services, and other services that residents throughout Park County and the region access to support their daily needs. We have seen growth in some more real estate-oriented industries in the past decade, specifically growth in real estate, professional services, as well as construction, which indicates a growing demand for tourism and second home development within the county. An interesting trend that we have identified is that the amount of jobs within the county have grown at a faster rate than the population over the last 20 years. And this has been supported by a greater percentage of people that are commuting into Park County for jobs on a daily basis. In 2002, about 10% of the workers in Park County commuted in from outside of Park County daily for work. This number has grown to nearly 21% in 2019, indicating a greater proportion of the workforce that has to commute within the county for their jobs. And this is one of the reasons that economic growth has been able to outpace population growth. However, going forward, for the county to be able to sustain its recent economic activity, growth of the labor force is needed. And one of the reasons that we're looking at a range of population forecasts for the county. We have taken the population employment forecasts and used those to estimate housing demand for the unincorporated portion of the county to help guide the land use plan. Currently, about 45% of the households within Park County are located in the unincorporated portions of the county. We expect this rough ratio of housing units going into the unincorporated portion of the county to continue into the future, and are using these forecasts of new housing units within the unincorporated portion of the county to help guide land use decisions within the plan. Another trend that we've been tracking related to housing is the housing vacancy rate, which is currently 13.7%. Vacant housing includes seasonal and short-term rental housing stock, which has been growing within the county in recent years. We've also factored in more real-time data sources such as building permits, new address requests for the county, as well as requests for water taps from Northwest Rural Water to underpin our primary data sources that often lag a year or two in terms of real-time conditions. And what we have found is that in the past 2 or 3 years, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, growth has increased to rates not seen since the mid-2000s or mid-1990s within Park County. And a lot of this growth appears to be driven by an influx of seasonal homeowners, retirees, as well as short-term rental units within the county. The demand for these types of new residents and uses in our housing stock is something that needs to be considered within the development of the plan.
Hello, this section focuses on the factors influencing growth in Park County. As part of the land use plan process, the project team has been working with county staff and our technical working group to assess the different factors. So one of the first factors we looked at in terms of what's influencing future growth in Park County is to take out the factors, the areas that have some sort of prohibitive factors that might limit severely or preclude future development. So things like public lands, which occupy a large portion of the county, state and federal lands, buffers from different roadways, as well as railroads, and wetlands. And so those are some of the initial screening that we did in the mapping to try to get to the areas that are most likely and most suitable for future development. So the first step in the process was to develop the area which is shown in blue, which represents generally private lands within the county. And so those are the areas we are most likely to talk about, most likely to see future development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the factors that influence suitability on those lands next. We have also been looking at the suitability of development on those private lands in the county, and looking at a variety of feasibility factors that feed into that. So we looked at analysis criteria for things like distance to infrastructure, access to services, distance to roads, steep slopes, soil characteristics as it influences septic systems. So you can see on the map the different colors. The blue areas have a higher level of suitability than the areas that are shown in yellow or orange. And so this suitability analysis isn't meant to imply that development will not occur or cannot occur in any of these locations. It's really just meant to imply, provide some parameters for guiding development to the areas that are most suitable and most cost effective through the land use plan. So we'll come back to that as the land use plan progresses. We have also been looking at and working with service providers to look at issues related to domestic water service, where that is available, what the limiting factors are. And we've prepared a couple of handouts that are available on the project website if you're interested in learning more about where domestic water comes from in Park County and what the current situation is regarding that. Generally, the overall amount of water is not the issue. It's really kind of how we get the water to different areas where development may occur. We've also heard concerns about the quality and productivity of individual wells, and that's really an unpredictable factor and varies by location, not something that we have documentation on, as well as a lack of documentation on groundwater. We've also been looking at subdivisions in terms of where they've occurred in the county over the last 10 to 20 years and thinking about where they might occur in the future. One of the main points we wanted to make here is that the county does not control all subdivisions of land. There are some exemptions through the state. You may have heard of the family exemption and kind of the opportunities that folks have there to carve off a parcel for a family member. Those do not require a permit through the county. So regardless of what comes out of the planning process and ends up in the regulations, there will be some subdivisions that continue to happen that are outside of this process. As part of the growth forecast, we've also looked at recent trends in terms of the different planning areas and estimated what the new housing demand is likely to be in different parts of Park County. As you might expect, the majority of new housing in unincorporated portions of the county is most likely to be built in the Cody and Powell areas, and that the amount of land in new housing development is really going to be driven by market demand and the zoning that accommodates that. So how much, what the lot sizes are and where that occurs. Zoning existing regulations in different parts of the county. And one of the things that you'll hear more about in the next section related to the questions is that minimum lot sizes vary by planning area. And in some cases, they're really not necessarily aligned with land suitability or the values that we've been hearing from the community. So after we worked through all of the suitability characteristics, we also looked at potential conflicts based on the values we've heard from the community. One of those potential conflicts is irrigated ag land. These are the areas that we've heard a lot from the community concerned that they're being lost through development. We know this is a finite resource, and fragmentation of these lands really impacts the feasibility of agriculture operations in those different areas. We're also looking at wildlife habitat, and as you likely know, all of Park County is essentially considered wildlife habitat of some sort. Our primary focus through this process has been on crucial wildlife habitat. We know that it's important to the community, but really want to focus in on those areas that are most critical. Game and Fish is currently looking at developing a multi-species habitat layer for crucial wildlife habitat. What's shown on the slide here is crucial elk habitat only. So this layer would evolve through the process based on what we hear from the community. You'll hear more about wildlife habitat, and we have some specific questions for you in the next section. Essentially rolled together all of these different factors that influence growth and tried to identify different growth contexts within Park County. So this is essentially looking at, based on suitability and potential conflicts, where do different planning areas align, and that's really intended to help us focus policy discussions through this process. The first grouping of planning areas indicates where we have both high suitability in terms of development potential in areas of high conflict, and this includes Cody Powell Rural, Powell, Cody Local, and Sage Creek. And essentially these areas have the most land that's suitable for development, also high pressure for development, but we also have a lot of irrigated ag land and crucial habitat. And so, you know, I think the pressure for development, if that continues, will be something that potentially negatively impacts the viability of ag and habitat in these areas. So part of our rationale in kind of grouping these is to help us refine the questions that we need to be responding to, we need input on through the process that will ultimately feed into the plan. And this second tier of growth context focuses on Clark, North Fork, the Middle South Fork, Lower South Fork, and Meeteetse Local. And these are areas where we have relatively low suitability for development, but high conflict in terms of agricultural lands and or wildlife habitat. And the final grouping of growth contexts that we identified are areas where we have low suitability and low conflict. So this includes the Upper Clarks Fork, Sunlight, and Upper South Fork, which are predominantly public land, wilderness area, very remote areas of the county. So while we do have some population in these areas, it's pretty minimal, and the likelihood of there being much development in these areas is pretty slim. So different set of policy considerations here. We have mountain valleys with a lot of constraints in terms of access. And really the focus in these areas is going to be, has been and will continue to be on protecting kind of wild and scenic quality of these areas and limiting the impacts associated with tourism related uses. And then lastly, as you think about responding to the questions in the survey, we really want you to take into account that there are a lot of trade-offs to consider within this plan. We have very clear vision from the community in terms of what types of things they don't want to change, but we also hear concerns about maintaining private property rights and kind of the role of the county. And so all of those things really kind of factor also into housing affordability, economic diversification, and other issues that we've heard concerns about from the community in terms of trying to maintain a balance in the overall quality of life in the community. And so as we think about this, the plan is really intended to be cognizant both of kind of maintaining the opportunities people have for their own property, but also concerns we've heard about, people saying, well, I want to do this on my property, but I don't want my neighbor to do that on their property. So we're trying to strike a balance through this process, and your feedback will help us kind of work through some of those questions.